Thanks for taking the time after lunch to come and join this presentation. Let me introduce myself and my colleague here. I'm Gopi Sankaran. I'm the Vice President for the Strategic Ecosystems at Informatica. And today I'll be joined by Rajiv Srinivasan. I'll be joining in 10-15 minutes to talk about something which has been near and dear to what we have been doing over the last year and a half. And that is around what is a journey from AI prototypes to enterprise-grade generative AI applications, basically generative AI applications in production. This is a very interesting presentation for us is because this is a compilation of the learnings, what we have done with our customers, especially in the enterprise space. And it's been a great journey what we have been having, and we wanted to share that with you around all these learnings. So, as we start through this presentation, let me start with the requirements of the Gen AI apps in enterprise. So if you look at we are very glad that generative AI applications are getting adopted in the enterprise. But to do that also it also creates certain fundamental requirements that we see, and we compile it across 5 major pillars. The first one is around groundedness. You might have heard a lot about grounding, so I'll quickly go over it. Grounding is basically the process of anchoring your models to the information. And as part of that, we do a lot of training. We work with the facts in the enterprise and train those models. But one of the major challenges, what we also have to avoid as part of this is around the hallucination aspect of these models. And this can be avoided. This is basically when you have your LLMs respond in a very plausible way of response which might be factually wrong. And in an enterprise, you cannot afford to do that. And that is something we start to see as we go into production, it has a very negative impact. And there are different ways to avoid it. Fine-tuning is one of the options, but all these stuff comes with a cost impact and how to manage it and how do you ensure consistency and things like that. The other major requirement which we see is around contextualization. See, the big difference between what you do with the world knowledge versus an enterprise knowledge is enterprises have their own terminologies. They have their own languages, which got developed, which got added, all these stuff happening, building that context. And most of the models do not really directly understand that enterprise terminology and the semantics associated with that. So one of the things as part of these requirements is we got to ensure that all the prompts are ensured with that business context, so that when you have that rich summarization and the response, that these are actually applicable to your business and not just any of the context which is there. The third one, probably everybody talked about it. You will also hear people focused on this even during this conference. It is around the quality. One of the major things to understand is not all data is created equal. What it means by that is there is different levels of quality of the data, and as you feed the different levels of quality to the data, that directly impacts what sort of summarizations and the responses you're going to get from your Gen AI apps and what is applicable to you. Most of the time in the enterprises, these responses need to be accurate, and to get that accuracy, what is the level of quality that needs to be associated with that data? This is something which we at Informatica focus very, very deeply, and we will touch upon it in today's presentation and the demonstration. The fourth aspect, and this is kind of very interesting, not many people really give a lot of importance, we feel, is around the ease of development and deployment. Because this field is so rapid changing, and agility is the name of the game when it comes to building Gen AI apps, you need to have a robust system where you can develop easily, but also deploy it and also manage it. So limited amount of hand coding, but more on orchestration and using the tools really helps in an enterprise setting as you go from a prototype to production. And it also helps with the rapid adoption of the new Gen AI technologies. I mean, you guys are going to hear it even this conference. You heard it in many of the other conferences which are happening in our industry around the pace of change that is happening within generative AI space. And finally, there's the most important, we consider it as very paramount at Informatica, is around the governance and the security. See, anytime you build an enterprise-grade Gen AI application, transparency and data traceability is a must. Lineage, deep lineage, how the data comes from, where the data comes from, how the data got transformed, all those details matters, where especially when if you're working in a regulated industry or in an enterprise setting, how do you adhere to all these compliance requirements, all that stuff? It is a prime requirement and it is paramount. And the other aspect of governance, security, is also how do you enforce the data access policies? And finally, it's also around the cost and usage control. When you go into production, if you do not have the right level of FinOps or right level of understanding what is the usage pattern and the cost pattern, it can grow immensely. So here, from our point of view, it is when we look at the requirements of Gen AI apps, it is around how we can build that foundational success. And we believe that foundational success for a Gen AI app in production is around building that enterprise context along with that metadata intelligence. So, why Informatica for enterprise-grade Gen AI? I presume many of the folks here know who we are because we have been in the industry. People who have been working on data and analytics have encountered Informatica in some setting. What we did for the enterprise is we created this domain of data management. What Informatica has been a leader in is purely in the space of data management. We go from discovery, integration, privacy, security, governance, quality, mastering, but we still stay in the layer of data management. What we did for the enterprise in analytics is what we are trying to do now with respect to Gen AI. And this is a great and a sweet spot for us because at the end of the day, generative AI is still fed by the data, and robust data management processes are a must. So we look at it across 7 major pillars. So one of the first things when it comes to why Informatica has been successful and we have all these learnings from our enterprise customers in this space is because is around the scalability and of the data transformation and the integration, what we do with respect to the vector databases and the knowledge bases. The other one, earlier I talked about it as part of the requirements, it is around the enforcing of the data quality and observability. Because if you want an accurate, unbiased, and reliable responses, quality is a must. Understanding the level of quality is paramount. The third one, which we do with respect to Informatica for enterprise-grade Gen AI, is around the explainability and traceability. In an enterprise setting, lineage, explainability of the AI responses is a must. And any of these definitions, the metadata really helps as part of that. And we earlier talked about metadata intelligence, and we will show you a little bit more in a demonstration also is, as Informatica, we also guide the LLMs which you use with the right semantic intelligence, which is more domain specific, and it helps to ground your relevant responses. And earlier we talked about data security, and here is around how do you address sensitive data issues, and this is paramount with respect to governance and what sort of access management policies you have. So one of the other things which we have been seeing in enterprise is also around creating this unified master repositories, because that provides a consistent, trustworthy, and comprehensive generative AI responses. This is possible with respect if you have heard about master data management or 360 views or things like that. That is something we at Informatica really focus on, and it has been very helpful for the adoption of AI in production. And finally, earlier we talked about it, simplification of the Gen AI apps, especially with respect to the no-code, low-code orchestration and also providing the cross LLM support. In an enterprise, we do believe that there will be multiple LLMs based on purpose-built for their own purpose. And to do that, you do need a cross LLM support from the data management side that can help with all these stuff. So this is our platform. At Informatica, what we provide as part of this is we are a SaaS-based solution. We are actually a platform. As earlier I talked about the 7 major pillars. Here are the 7 major services that we have as part of that. And this addresses all those requirements that is needed for building a GenAI app in production. Again, connectivity has been a huge strength in our industry with respect to Informatica. We connect to almost every sort of enterprise sources, and now we have an ability to bring that for vectorization or to the AI systems. And we also have our own AI engine. So this presentation is also a learning not just from our customers, but also what we have done in GenAI space. We have our own AI engine called Claire, and it is an AI-powered metadata intelligence and also provides automation. It has its Copilot, it has its GPT versions, all these stuff for data practitioners. But overall, our platform is the Intelligent Data Management Cloud, and deployed on AWS, and it is a SaaS solution which powers many of these GenAI applications in enterprise. So, as I go through this, what we have seen, again, earlier I talked about this is based on the learning from our customers, is one of the things what we see is around RAGs. Many of you would have already learned about it. You have been developing some RAGs. Retrieval augmented generation is an ideal framework for building prototypes. And today, RAGs are basically it combines the information retrieval with the LLMs, the generative models, and that provides these context-rich aware answers. And it has 3 major components: retrieval, retrieve the data from the relevant documents, databases, knowledge bases, things like that. Augmentation, augment your query by providing the LLM with that additional context. And finally, generation, which is around what do you do with respect to coherently summarize these responses and answer the query. And this is a very simple architecture. It helps to easily start with developing these prototypes. And this is the architecture which most of the people, if you have developed any RAGs, this is the approach you generally take. But at the same time, this RAG framework, when it goes to production, it needs to address certain challenges, or a bunch of challenges. One of the things, earlier we talked about the hallucination and the inaccuracy of LLMs. And this is because of what sort of data you're training it with. With that. The fragmented context tends to be, there could be 2 or 3 systems, but at the same time, the context can also have something else from the world knowledge. And if so, how do you address that? Dependency on freshness and immediate of operational data. You can have multiple systems in an enterprise, and when they feed into the LLMs now have to make a decision as to what is the recency, is it the relevant answer, how do you actually go through it, like things like that. And again, the growth in data volume, the data volumes grow massively in an enterprise. If so, does just the retrieval systems are enough, or how do you actually address it? Because how many of the retrieval requests are you going to make when you have multiple systems or things like that? And finally, one of the things which we have seen is when people are developing prototypes, especially within an enterprise, data security and compliance requirements are not given the right level of importance. Because at that point, the goal of the prototype tends to be like, hey, this is the outcome we need. So because of that, some of these stuffs are not focused too much, but when it goes to production, they manifest into much bigger problems of access policies or compliance policies or addressing to regulatory requirements or things like that. And finally, earlier we talked about it. As RAGs grow, there is an issue of cost and how do you actually maintain it. Again, this is something what we have seen is with one of the customers, they were talking about, hey, we used Informatica in 120 plus of their prototype applications. And then our question was, how many of them actually went to production? probably less than 2. So this is the issue what we have as part of, yes, there is a lot of development happening, but at the same time, when it goes to production, does it actually take care of all these challenges? And if so, how do you use a platform like Informatica to help to address many of these challenges? One of the things what we are also seeing as part of that is the evolution of the RAGs into the agents. The agents in enterprise-grade GenAI, they tend to be autonomous. So these are moving from more static, direct question answering to more like a dynamic, task-oriented problem solvers. They helped with the decision making. They take iterative feedback. And these are automated systems, but at the same time, they're also automatically integrated into different API systems and things like that. We have seen, again, with our experiences more about agents are getting much more adopted, and the success of building agents in production is much higher than just simple RAG prototypes. And we consider this as more of an extension and an evolution of RAGs into the agents as we see more production adoption. So let me bring my colleague here, Rajiv, who will actually go through what sort of architecture and what is that blueprint which really helps with respect to where customers are using data management in the context of enterprise-grade GenAI applications. Rajiv, I understand.
Thank you, Gopi. Can everyone hear me loud and okay?
Yes.
All excited? Nice. Nice to see some vibe in the room. So what I'm going to do for the rest of my talk is I'll provide some aspects of data management, enterprise-grade data management when it comes to generative AI. Then as Gopi was mentioning, I'll dive deep into an architectural blueprint, right, about building generative AI applications. Then followed by that, I'll show a live demo that we have built using our best practices. And also, I'll kind of, the backdrop for the live demo is a supply chain kind of a storyline that we'll walk you through. With that, let's go into the first section. So the first step is, like once you have identified your use case, is going to be about discovering the different data and information that you want to bring into your vector database, right? And for which, the first step you need is a pipeline, a data integration pipeline for bringing structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data at scale into the vector database or knowledge bases, right? Once you've achieved that, the next step that comes to is, or the two critical aspects when it comes to generative AI in terms of data integration is embedding and chunking, right? Embedding, for those of you who don't know, embedding is nothing but a numerical representation of the underlying semantic meaning of the data, right? And this, you need to, for a better strategy, you will need to select the right model for embedding, because that affects both the performance, your search accuracy, as well as your response quality, right? And the second part of this, your pipeline strategy, is the chunking, right? Is to have the right chunking strategy. So with Informatica Data Pipeline, right, you can transform the data and bring the data and use the out-of-box chunking strategy that Amazon Bedrock provides, and chunk the data, and this primarily affects both your response accuracy, and then the second part is the retrieval accuracy as well. So having the right chunking strategy and having the flexibility of choosing model is very, very important when you're defining your data integration pipeline of bringing data. And one other aspect of data management, or aspect of bringing data, is bringing that high-quality, trustable data, which is your master data. And we are investing in making this very, very seamless for you to be able to bring data from master data from Informatica MDM systems into vector databases. Again, we saw one aspect of bringing data into knowledge bases, but as we walk through the blueprint, I'll also show you that it will also be that at some point, we will also reach out to these databases during inference, right? It's not that there are certain operational systems also that you want to go reach out, and bring data from in an enterprise setup where you will be reaching out and bringing data in as part of your RAG application. So is bringing data just enough? What we noticed is bringing data alone is not just enough. And there is a very big upside that we saw when we also brought the metadata. Metadata is nothing but it provides the semantic context or the underlying context, right? Now you're guiding your LLM to generate based on the nuance, the relationship, and also the intention, could be both the business intention and the technical intention on why and how the data was built. And when you generate based on that, you're able to guide the LLM better, right? And some of the things that we will also showcase in our demo is being able to dynamically be able to do data selection, right? So you can actually, depending on the data quality, you'll be able to be dynamically select, hey, I'm going to use this other data which has a higher quality compared to the other one. Or at least inform the user that what is the quality of the data. So, and also bring in like business definitions and business terms and business context within your response so that you're improving the explainability of your response as well, right? So, and then few other things that we have also noticed is any kind of detection in bias, right, based on quality, or skewness in a column value, right? Though bringing those metadata information into your generative AI application and guiding your LLM has very big potential upside. One interesting area that as we were working with our customers, one thing that we noticed was when we got in the metadata and we asked the LLM to reason why it did in a certain way, why it reasoned in a certain way, and why this response was generated, the reasoning accuracy was much higher. And based on that reasoning, we were able to debug we were able to understand why that LLM generated that response and what we have to do as part of prompt engineering to be able to modify our prompt to reduce hallucination in our response. So literally, as you're building your application, bringing that metadata provides more information into why it reasoned and how it reasoned. And the third aspect that we are focusing on is being able to democratize this across no-code, low-code within the data community, right? Democratize building of these generative AI applications. So with Informatica, right, we have an out-of-the-box connector for both Amazon Bedrock and Bedrock knowledge bases. And what we have also done as part of our connectors is we have worked with the Bedrock team to work on those unified APIs. So why unified APIs? So that if you want to tomorrow later on switch between models, it is much more easier for you. You don't have to re-implement the whole connector, the whole pipeline, or the whole application. So we are enabling you to switch between models using unified APIs. And all of this is deployed on a serverless environment. So all your pipeline, with a few clicks, you'll be able to deploy into a serverless environment. And the FinOps angle is also very, very important in an enterprise. So that's where the API security and the API management layer is also very, very critical. And our framework already comes with those capabilities as well. We are taking this a step further. What we are also doing is we are introducing what is called as accelerators or recipes as part of our framework. So with this, within the enterprise, let's say you built your standard connectors or your standard executors, right? You can standardize them and publish them as part of the recipes so that others can use it as building blocks. That way we're able to standardize it and even jumpstart your development of generative AI applications. So those are the three areas that we are focusing on. Now, I'm going to go, based on those three areas, I'm going to walk you through an architectural blueprint, right? And this is the blueprint. I know most of you want to take pictures. I'll go into the details of exactly what each of those components are and how they all come together, right? But again, this is not the end blueprint. This is the agent architecture. So, okay. So the first part is an agent subprocess, right? So whenever a user asks any kind of user question or anything. This is where your query first lands into the agent. As part of the agent, the first step is it's being pushed to a planner, right? And the planner is the main brain behind this agent. All it basically does is that it looks at, tries to understand what the user intent is based on the question that he has sent. And based on that, it tries to build an optimized plan, right? What are all the different systems that it has to go query, where it has to bring the relevant data from, and how it has to bring the data, right? And what we feed as part of to the agent, as part of the prompt, is the metadata from about these different systems, right? As you will see in the demo, we have about 5 systems that we work with. And we have provided the LLM saying that this is what, at a high level, these systems contain, right? And this is where these systems are. So based on that, it is able to go and generate a plan to say, for this question, I have to go execute this query. So think of it that it's very analogous to how a data consumer would do, right? When a data consumer or a data analyst is provided with a problem, he needs to understand what are all the different systems that are there, how he has to bring that data, assimilate all of that data, and summarize and provide it to whoever requested it for, right? So this is that brain behind this agent. And it passes, of course, there is more things to it, like validation, making sure that it is the user intent is valid, right? There's responsibility and everything that comes into it. And then once it generates the plan is then sent to an orchestrator, right? The orchestrator has 2 main purpose. One is to be able to walk through each of the steps, right, and call the executor. And the second thing is pass the state between the executors as well. And then once the executor is, as part of the executor, again, it has a very single purpose, is to be able to bring data from its system. And the advantage of this is with Informatica accelerators, you can actually build executors and publish them and then standardize it across the organization. For example, let's say I want to bring data from Informatica MDM, or I want to bring data from Salesforce, right? You're now able to standardize how you can bring this data and all of the underlying mechanisms so that you can jumpstart or rapidly jumpstart your development. Governance. We spoke about governance and security. So this is another key layer that we are introducing within the agent framework. So this enables, so CDAM is our Cloud Data Access Management service, right? And as part of this, security compliance, security experts, compliance experts, as they write their policies for those different personas within these organizations, now all of those policies are now worked on, or are kind of, think of it like all of those policies are distilled inside this proxy, and all of the calls that you make to the underlying systems goes through this proxy. So we also, as part of the agent, we pass in all the end user details, right? Because these are all enterprise users, right? So we pass in all of those end user details, and then based on the policies that the security and compliance experts have defined, it basically decides whether I should retrieve the data as part of this executor or not. Right? So we have built that access protection layer within it. And then now it's able to call the different systems, the metadata systems, the enterprise systems, and also the different services. We're making it seamless for it to call the different services within the Informatica platform. And one other thing that we are also hearing is about multi-agent scenarios, right? Where an agent calls another agent. So if you have Amazon Bedrock agents that you have built, you can orchestrate them using our framework and our blueprint. Now that all the information that is needed, depending on whether the user has access and authorization to, is being retrieved and is sent back to the planner. Now it has collected the information from all the systems, and it has basically built a dynamic plan, collected all of that information, sent it back to the planner. Then the next step is the summarizer, right? All of this information is basically kind of sent back into the summarizer, and the summarizer's job is to distill all of this complex information, build the explainability, right? Summarize, build the explainability in terms of the enterprise jargon, the enterprise terms, and then send it back to the user. So that's the role of the summarizer. Followed by that, there is a key aspect, which is the front-end layer, right? In this front-end layer is more about, because these are enterprise users, it looks at authorization, authentication mechanisms, whether the user should be even able to use this chatbot or not, right? What personas are allowed to use. And also, another aspect to it is rate, like API limiting or rate throttling, right? This is very, very key, especially when it comes to you want to control the cost of your generative AI applications. And the blueprint that we have built actually uses Amazon Bedrock. One of the things that we really use as part of Bedrock is cross-region inferencing, right? This helps us to mitigate for any kind of non-expected peaks, right, in traffic. So it basically offloads the inferencing from one region to the other, and you don't even, again, within the client, you don't even see any kind of a blip or anything. It automatically does the cross-region inferencing as well. And then we do have integration with knowledge base, and we have integrated with the unified APIs. So with our framework, we will be supporting all of the knowledge base, all of the vector databases that knowledge base supports. And as Amazon expands their support for other knowledge bases, those knowledge bases will be, or those vector databases will become readily available within our framework. So that, and then we are again further simplifying it for you. We are bringing our recipes to this particular architecture so that we will have your jump starts or accelerators for planners and for your different components within the agent architecture so that you can get easily started with building your generative AI app on our framework. Okay, let's move into a demo. So for this demo, the backdrop is a supply chain. Nextech is a system. It's a fictitious company. They do sell-to-order computer hardware. I'm going to assume a persona of a supply chain analyst. And there are 5 systems that we have within this. And then based on the user query or intent, right? The user has intent to obtain information about the order, product, and various other things. And based on the user intent, right, the planner will generate a dynamic plan to go bring the data from the various systems that we have. So we have Salesforce, which has all the order information, right? We do have Informatica Supplier 360 and Product 360, which contains all of the high-quality, trusted data for both the supplier and product information. And then from our governance services, we will be bringing in metadata, right, about these different about the different informations. Especially when we look at custom object models, right? One thing that we see is LLMs are very good at deciphering common object models. Let's say if it wants to know about Salesforce models and everything, it already knows all of that. But what if there are custom object models within your enterprise, right? How does LLM has no understanding about that? How do you provide those contexts? So we will actually look at that. We will also bring in data quality, business glossary, and everything, and all of this within the app for the user to make decisions on. And then we do have a Oracle system, which is an operational system that contains kind of contains the supplier performance in terms of the lead times, right? How fast is the supplier delivering a product? All of that information in Oracle. And then in the demo, we will look at how through a query we are understanding the user intent and bringing all of that information in. So I'm going to switch screens here. So I'm going to walk into the demo. Okay, so this is, so it's a similar it's a chatbot interface, right? This is something that we're all familiar with. So I'm going to first ask, so I'm going to ask show pending orders. Right? In this case, what it's doing is it's actually sending everything to our backend, to the backend application. And as part of that, it's now deciphering what the user intent is. Based on the user intent, it's actually creating a dynamic plan. And based on the dynamic plan, it's now trying to figure out where do I bring that information from. So as you can see here, that one is, it also has the semantic context that a draft order is nothing but a pending order, right? The order status could be draft, but it knows that it has that context. And it also has that, hey, this is the product that has been ordered. And then it also brings in the system from where it is bringing information from, right? So we are bringing everything to the doorstep of the persona who is using this chatbot here. Now, the next question that I'm going to ask is, I want to know the details for this product, right? Give me details of the product ordered. So my intention is to know about the different product details, what are the different components that are associated with the product. So now, again, the planner is looking at what's my intent, converting that into a plan on what are all the systems within this enterprise of Nextech that I need to go query, right? And then based on that, once it knows what are all the different systems that it has to go query from, then once it executes the plan, now it's actually providing that plan to each of the underlying executors, right? And these executors go out, and then they're bringing in the different information. Right? And then as you can see here, it got the product details. It know that my intent was to bring this information, and it knew that this information is coming from Informatica Product 360, and the component details is coming from also the same product. So now I'm going to ask the second question, or I'm going to go towards is I want to understand who is my primary supplier for the GPU component. So again, it is now taking all of the history. It's passing all the history, and then it's passing the user intent as user prompt. And based on the history and the user question, it's trying to understand the intent here, right? And then again, the same process follows, right? Passing it on to the planner. Planner is providing the dynamic on what are all the systems that it needs to query. All of that information gets passed on to the summarizer, and then all of the summarizer is now going and looking at who the primary supplier is from the supplier 360. So what we have actually done here is we have literally shifted from one domain in MDM to another domain. We went all the way from product domain to supplier domain because of the metadata that we provided on what the relationship between the two domains are. Right? Now I'm going to ask is, I want to know the lead time, right? What is the lead time for montage, right? And this is something which every day, supply chain analyst cares about, is they want to understand the lead time. Now, in this case, it's a little different. It's a custom object model, right? It has no idea, LLM has no idea about what my custom object model is all about. So all it has to do is it has to go pick, look into our data catalog, understand what are all the different columns that are within the data catalog, and then based on that, it has to bring in the relevant data. And also you will see that it's actually going to do a dynamic data selection as well, whereby it has two data sets that's lying in there, and it'll go pick up from whichever is the right data set it wants to pick up. So what we have actually defined here is, we have defined a threshold that, hey, if your data quality is above a certain threshold, that's when you can pick the data, and we want you to pick always the latest data, right? So if the data quality falls below a certain threshold, then it'll automatically fall back to another data quality. So you can see here that once when it generates the report, it tells me a few things. This is when the last time that the report was modified, right? This is the last time that the report was modified. Here is my data quality score. It gives me the score, right? And if it's below a certain, I can now decide as a user right from within the app if I want to use this, or if I want to use a higher data with a higher quality, right? You can completely automate this, whereby you can, in an enterprise, saying that, hey, if my data quality is below a certain threshold, I don't want to use this data set. I'm going to dynamically select the other data set, right? And that's the power of bringing the metadata. Now, I see that there are certain terms. I don't know supply chain. I'm not an expert on supply chain. But what does CLT and OLT mean in my organization? How do I know that, right? If I go in here, I'm actually able to, we are not only, this is the AI explainability part. We are not only bringing the metadata, we're not only bringing the data, we are bringing the additional definitions and that has been defined in your governance glossary by your data stewards. So we are bringing that information as well, right? And it immediately knew that, hey, I'm looking for this. So as you can see here, so this plan went through 3 systems. It went through our Informatica CDGC, brought the metadata from there, brought in what are all the column names, the quality, when it was last modified, all of that metadata, followed by it went to Supplier 360 to understand, hey, what are the supplier parts where I need to bring from? Then it went to the Oracle database, right, to say, hey, what are those CLT and OLT timelines that has been reported recently? And then it went into vector database. This is where it also starts saying that, okay, I understand that they want to know, but is there a risk associated with it, right? So it also got in the risk of the data. So it basically went through 4 systems, and this is a common enterprise practice, right? All your data is not in a single system. And that's when we were saying RAG sometimes don't work because of the shortcomings, is because your data is not in a single system, right? And the other part that we saw through this is we did not bring everything into a vector database, right? There are sometimes for FinOps and various other purposes, it's probably much better to go reach out at inference and bring the data. But when building this, the one other thought that always came to our mind was latency, right? Again, for the purpose of our demo, yes, all of this is a synchronous query, right? It immediately pulls. You really have to kind of figure out when you want to bring the data in as asynchronous or when you want to generate a report. And our framework supports both synchronous and asynchronous as well, whereby I could have fired this query, right, and everything would have come back. And not only that, we're able to also provide the user saying, hey, does he want to use the other data source, right? There is another database, there is another data source left that has a higher quality of 100%, but it's from an older date. Do you still want to use it? Or do you, are you okay with this? Right? So bringing these kind of explainability and guidance within the app is actually very powerful in an enterprise setup. Now let's look at how all of this is working behind the scenes. What all did we do? So first, let's look at our Informatica MDM system. So what you're seeing here is our Informatica console. So I'm going to go into our MDM system. I'm going to look into our product 360 here. And I'm going to, so this is the product, right, that I was looking at. So I'm going to search for the product here. So that's the product, right? And then we saw that if you look at the bill of materials, we looked at the bill of materials. These are the different components it has, right? And then here is the NVIDIA component. And then we were able to bring all of this information within a single chat console. And then here is the 360 view. And you can see here that we were jumping from one domain, which is the product domain, to the supplier domain. And this is a very, very common practice in the enterprise that we see. And so within the ChatGPT application, you are able to switch domains and as well, right? And then Montage was one of the suppliers that we were looking at, right? And we were able to get those informations as well. let's look at governance. This is where, this is our data governance. This is where we got all our metadata information from. So this was the Oracle supplier system, right? So we had this, this is the data set that we, this was the older data set, and then we have two data sets in here. This is the newer data set, right? And this is the data set from 11/30, and it has a data quality score of 81.57, right? And that's what we saw. So we are bringing all of this information into the generative AI application. Again, for your application to bring that level of quality, it's very, very important to have a strong data foundation within an enterprise. So now, if I look at, if I want to know more about this, right, where did my, let's say I'm going to look at what all it contains. So this is the business glossary, right, that we had, and this is where all the glossary information came from within the application. So all of this has been defined by your data stewards or by your data governance stewards. So we are extending those capabilities that you have already worked on within your generative AI application. So I'm going to switch here. So I'm going to, now that we kind of went through the demo, I'm going to look at what the executor flow looked like, right? What all did we do behind the scenes? What happened there? So when you ask the question, who is the primary supplier for my GPU component, went to the agent, then the planner. This is exactly what the planner produced, the output that it produced, right? And then it sends it to the orchestrator. The orchestrator basically goes and queries supplier 360. And then once the response is back, all of that information is sent to the planner. And then, again, all that information is sent to the summarizer, and all of the information and the final result is produced back. So this is in case of an MDM. What did we do before I go into that, one other option that we see is also that you can also bring this information into a vector database. Especially one best practice that we found as we were working on with our customer was whenever you have a JSON format, having a hierarchical chunking strategy was really delivering very optimal results for our use case, where we were able to link the different domains together. So one option is either you reach out directly to NDM at inference, or you bring the data into a knowledge base and vectorize that information. And then finally, it's the same output. Now, let's look at how the metadata, when we asked for the supplier lead time, how the metadata intelligence and what all did we do behind the scenes for that. Again, went to the agent, to the planner. The planner looked at the user intent, compiled the output, right? That are all the systems and that needs to be executed to answer or respond to this. And then it sent it to the orchestrator. The orchestrator first figured out that this is a custom object model. So it did not have information. So it basically went ahead, and the first step was to make the metadata query. So it queried the metadata. And based on the metadata, we again made an LLM call to be able to dynamically generate the SQL query. And as part of that, we passed in all the metadata, all of the metadata information, plus the SQL query back. The second step was to execute the SQL query, right? And then this is where the CDAM, or Cloud Data Access Management proxy, came in and said, does this user have access to this underlying data source or not? If yes, if it is a yes, then the information was passed back. And then the summarizer distills all of that information, right? One key aspect to it was, in this one, if you have noticed, there is one best practice is there is a lot of play that happens between how you render versus how you summarize, right? And the summarization and the UX team had to really work hand in hand in case for this customer on how they really wanted to render this information and how the summarizer should be outputting the information. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Gopi to take it home. And this is our architectural blueprint, end-to-end blueprint that we really dived deep into.
Thanks, Reggie. That was a massive geeky session, but this is what we have been doing for the last year and a half, working on with many of our customers internally. But this gives you an idea of when we say from AI prototypes to Gen AI apps and production, this is what we consider as enterprise grade and what it entails to bring it to production. And it was quite an exciting experience for us to learn and try to develop from that and also share all that information with all of you. And again, if you want to get a little bit more information, both on the technical side and also some more excitement about whether we come to our booth, that it's 1432. And in addition, we also have gamified this supply chain assistant, which you saw. So there is a game which we have. Come play with it. You will have a direct first-hand experience of what an enterprise customer or how they actually go through when it comes to Gen AI apps in their workspace settings. So it's pretty cool. Come join us and have some discussions. And we will be here to clarify also if you have any other questions. So appreciate it, Reggie, over here.